Welcome to Decentralized Dawn, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age. So we are sitting here, we just kind of said, let's look at what we can kind of do, not to front run, but to prepare and be more, kind of disciplined in terms of your investment, persona, who you are, what you want to do. And as a show, we've kind of talked about, let's kind of focus in on what you believe in and care about, and has kind of been validated in your mind as in terms of where things can go. And one of the things that we keep kind of circling back at and wanted to take a deeper dive and look at is what are kind of the best options if you wanted to, stake and reinvest Ethereum. And, there's different platforms out there. There's different ways to look at it and go about it. And Chicago did a pretty great job of, walking through the process on a few of the different, options. And that's what we're going to kind of take a look at now. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the intro, Disco. It's interesting because Disco and we've been talking about it on the show, being an ETH validator, and obviously just, ETH is a deflationary asset now where, over time, the amount of ETH is actually going down, which, I don't know if any currency for a longer period of time I'm sure the US dollar has had it for short little periods to try and adjust for other things, but it's truly remarkable, the deflationary aspect and the fact that you can stake, secure the network, and earn rewards. And as Disco and I have said, and protect yourself a couple layers from buying something or investing in something and letting FOMO brain take over. So there's definitely a lot of positives there. So, I don't know if I put a genius chart together as much as we actually, now we're going to compare solo staking versus Rocketpool versus Lido. So the two liquid stakers, and those are the three biggies. There's a bunch others coming up, but these are the three that get the most attention. So I thought this is a good place to start, and I understood it pretty well. But the cool thing is that now I have a couple solo stakers. I actually tested the waters with Rocketpool, and I've tested the waters with Lido. So I guess for me, it's always better, if something just feels scammy or terrible, don't do it and just learn about it and move on. But with these, they're all good for their own reasons. So I wanted to see which one was best and which one fit my kind of staking long-term profile best. So that said, let's dig into it. First off, for those who can't see, the image on the left is the solo staking image, and it was from Dolly, and it just on number one,
it's pretty good.
Just said 1970s retro, have the Ethereum logo and have solo staking in there. And AI was not able really to do text that well, and now all of a sudden it can perfectly. Those are all words. Usually you get these foreign or these alien hieroglyphics in place of the words. And the fact that there's a poster over an old almost Apple IIe computer that in that awesome 70s vibe with a lava lamp that says solo staking, Dolly +1 on that one. So we got solo staking versus Rocketpool versus Lido. And I actually started out and I had check boxes for the winner, but then I took them away. I'm like, there is no winner and loser here, because it all totally depends on what you're trying to do. So just for those newer to the environment, solo staking, for a validator, right? So you have a validator and you need to have 32 ETH, which in today's dollars is right around $64,000 at 2,000.
Good math. Good math.
Yeah, easy math. We like easy math. But so it's not cheap, and you cannot run, at least at this point. And in the future, you should be able to, but right now you can only run a solo staking node with 32 ETH. And the beauty of the solo staking node is it's very clean. You're going directly into the staking contract and there's very few variables. But to get in, you either have had to have gotten in early or, you need to make a pretty sizable investment to run your first node. So Rocketpool validators.
Excuse me, Chicago. So do a run your own node as the beautiful orangey image appears, that little nook down in the basement. I love, and I use the word nook purposely there. You need also some hardware to run that 32 node, correct?
Yes. So you can use a Linux machine, but you need a lot of RAM, and you can get away with a 2 terabyte hard drive, but you probably need a 4 terabyte solid state hard drive, 32 to 64 gigs of RAM. A lot of people use these little machines called NUCs. They're little Linux boxes. And they're really handy, but the NUC with the solid state drive and the memory, I think will run you now $800, but when I sent it to you, it sounds like the new version's out, so maybe it's a little more. So I think under $1,000 you can get that box set up, and it's with the 4 terabytes, especially with how big the Ethereum blockchain is. You're running a full node on there. You want the full 4 terabytes because right now I think my drive's at about 1.86 terabytes, and you don't want to always have to. There's something called pruning that you do over time to clean it up, and that'll free up 35-40% space at a time. But you don't want to, after 5 months, always having to be pruning. You want to be able to prune kind of a little more infrequently for your validator.
So it's essentially, call it a half an ETH more in kind of startup hardware costs.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And you need, you need good bandwidth. You don't need super fast bandwidth at home, but you do need consistent bandwidth. So cable modem's fine, DSL's fine. The ETH validator will take up a lot of upload and download space. So if you got a lot of kids watching Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu and all that stuff, I was going grossly over, and then I had to go to the unlimited data plan, which was like another $30. But I was going over by triple or quadruple the 1.2 terabytes. And again, we have a lot of streaming going on in the house, but this was by far the biggest because it's just 24/7 just going. So what do you have to be concerned with or aware of from a security perspective to run an internal node? Like I say internal, but to run a at home, so to speak, node. So to run like an ETH validator and your own node, you definitely want to lock it down. And I'm no IT expert, so I'm going to get out of my expertise. If you've got a little network in the home, like you run something like Ubiquity, I would personally almost pay someone to make sure that that node is running, like create a new IP address and kind of keep it off the main network. Don't let for your Wi-Fi, don't let, only let like one Wi-Fi see it. Don't let, guest networks even see that it exists. So it's definitely beyond the scope of this show, but I will say, like, I'm fairly tech savvy, but when it comes to IT stuff, not really tech savvy at all. And I'm kind of allergic to it. And this, like, it was a learning curve, and I definitely took my time, and I had some people giving me good advice, but I hired someone, I think on Upwork or Fiverr, to kind of help me secure the router down and just make sure I was using best practices, obviously without exposing passwords and stuff to them. It was more like an advice session where they were kind of blindly telling me what to do. So, be smart about it, but it's definitely, I would say it's not for the faint of heart, but it's not so overwhelming. And I will say, once I got it set up, and especially once I got the validators running, actively and started earning ETH rewards. It was in my crypto journey, it was one of the most rewarding kind of longer term experiences. I wish I could stake with Bitcoin. I wish there was some mechanism there where you could do it where it was safe and secure. But, Bitcoin is the theory is more digital gold, right? But with Ethereum, with the smart contracts and with a very vibrant ecosystem of NFTs, DeFi and whatnot, like it's just a perfect fit for it. And, I just like Bitcoin, I see as money. I see ETH as a base money as well. So it was super rewarding to get into.
Yeah. And it basically, it represents kind of the ultimate, decentralization. You're sitting there independently operating something, contributing to the network, getting rewards based on that. And there's no middlemen involved, so that really, if you kind of look at the purest side of it, you got to kind of think of that as that. So I would imagine getting that set up, you got to high five yourself pretty aggressively. Like, dude, that's awesome. Like, who made it happen?
Yeah, and you're running a full ETH node. It's just like with Bitcoin, even if you're not a miner, like running a full Bitcoin node, again, is kind of another notch in that journey where you're helping validate and secure the network. And if you're not running a full node, then you're taking some other entity's word that is the correct chain and transactions, and that is the order. Now, you don't have to run one, but the more you get into this, the more I think you want to run a full node on either or both of these chains.
Agreed. Okay, so that's a great kind of setup. And then Rocketpool, you don't need the full 32, so it's a lower point of entry from a ETH bag perspective.
Yeah, so Rocketpool, really interesting what these guys did. I mean, super creative. So with Rocketpool, it was 16 ETH that you had to stake, but then they've brought it down to 8. And I think they're already working on you only having to stake 4 or possibly even less ETH. Here's my analogy. I consider it, I just look at it as a train with a bunch of train cars. You, as the validator, put in your 8 ETH for this example. So you're basically providing the engine, right? The locomotive, and basically the other 24 ETH, because you do, on the Ethereum blockchain, just like we talked about, you need 32 ETH to stake. So what Rocketpool really smartly does with smart contracts is the other 24 ETH come from people from the outside, and it's called just liquid staking. And they basically attach their cars to your validator. Together, you all make 32 ETH, and you get the rewards on your 8 ETH, plus you get 14% commission on their 24 ETH. So already you can see, if you have 32 ETH, you could set up one solo staker at 32 ETH or 4 Rocketpool mini pools. And with those 4, each one gets 24 rail cars hooking up to your 4 locomotives. And that's 96 ETH you get 14% on. So pretty crazy. You can already see like, oh, wow, like I'm already running a validator. I'm getting an added bonus on top of just staking my own ETH.
The only caveat I would say about the analogy of the train is it is a rocket. So maybe we need to associate it with, capsules of rockets or something, but carry on. I'm following you.
Yeah, I probably should use a rocket, but then like, don't those like, as it exits orbit, they like blow off and then
get dropped. So it's
they get dropped and burn up, going back into the atmosphere or going to the ocean. I don't know. So I didn't know how people could attach to the rocket pool without getting like left out in space. So
understood.
I have to make analogies super simple for myself, or I quickly like don't understand them. So Lido finally, this one's interesting. I included them here, but if you're validating ain't gonna happen. Like, unless you're one of the 29 companies that has, I don't know, over 7,000 validators. So what's 7,000 times 32? Like,
Wow.
was that 21,000 or is that 210,000 ETH? Like, all but one of these 29 validators for Lido have over 7,000 validators, and the one that doesn't has like 5,000. So, and they're probably the newer one, and they're building up. So, as you could already see, so basically it is a centralized pool of massive validating companies that are behind Lido. Interestingly, they get 10%. So remember I said Rocketpool is 14%. I'll go into this a little more depth in a bit, but they get 10%, and that's split between these validators and between, I believe, the Lido Foundation. I don't know what that 10% split between those two is, but it's 10% per Lido. But again, if you're trying to validate, you're a solo staker like me, if I come to them with my 2 validating nodes, they'd be like, and flip, like ant flipped off pencil, right? So can't do it. So basically with validating, we're down for this from solo staking to Rocketpool, which makes most sense. So I touched on it before, attestations awards. The attestation is the rewards. Those are happening daily. It's basically every block that's proposed, you're basically saying like, yep, I agree. It's happening every block, and you're getting little teeny bits of ETH each time, and those add up over the week, and you get your the ETH gets sent to you it's almost exactly 7 days. I think it's 7 days and like 5 or 6 hours. So weekly, you're getting this 0.015 reward, and the more stakers that come in, that'll go down.
So those rewards are dropped to the wallet that's linked to the validator, or how does that go?
Yeah, so when you set this up, this was genius by them. When you set all of this up for safety and security, you put in a withdraw address. Your withdraw address is what gets all the rewards. That can be totally separate from the actual validator that you have. It's generally on a totally different off-chain hardware wallet. So the beauty is, if you ever get hacked or slashed or anything, you just have to send a signal up to Beacon Chain and the validators to say, hey, I'm out, and it will go to that withdraw address. That withdraw address cannot be changed for the massive 32 ETH withdrawal when you get out. So, obviously make sure you have access to that wallet or you're screwed, but it's a nice backup. So you get paid about every 7 days with this.
So you basically can just set up a dedicated wallet that'll get the rewards.
Yes, exactly. So the attestation awards do not count all of the awards. There are other rewards as well, where you actually are the one out of over 1 million validators now that proposes the block. Sometimes you can get over an ETH, very rare, or generally you get like, instead of 0.015, you get like 0.04, 0.02, or 0.06, but whatever it is, it's nice, and it should happen for you, I don't know, once a year or so. But, with my couple of validators, I've gotten lucky. I think I've had 3 or 4 now. So that is not counting those. That's why these numbers might look a little low. So you get 0.728 ETH, and this is just napkin math, but it's pretty close. You'll get about 0.728 ETH yearly just on the attestation side. So this is where Rocketpool gets interesting. You get that same 0.015-ish ETH a week times 52 weeks. So you get your same 0.728, plus you get the 14% on the other 96 ETH.
The other train riders.
Yeah, the train riders. So you get 14% of their rewards. So that number goes from 0.728 ETH to 1.0556 ETH. So obviously with Lido, that's not available at all. So roughly your reward for just attestation for your solo validator is about 2.5 or 2.25% right now. So it's actually lower than you hear a lot. And since I've been doing this research in the last week or two, because so many validators are coming online, we're actually seeing the guaranteed numbers. I swear Lido, when I checked last week, it was still at 4%, and now it's at 3.7%. So, the more validators are, the beauty is the more secure the Ethereum network is, because more and more people have their ETH staked to validate all the transactions that are going through. But the more you have, the less you get reward-wise from it.
So it's not like a first in sort of situation where you're grandfathered in at a higher rate. It's more of the market rate based on the amount of validation occurring overall.
Yes, it's just split amongst more validators.
Right. So it's diluted from that perspective. So you could have technically, if you were doing it 8 months ago, seen closer to the 4%, but
it was more like 5 or 6% or 7%. Yeah. So if you staked before the unlock, when ETH staking first came out, because remember, there was 2+ years where you could go in and stake and not unlock. And that was at 10%. Because I remember looking at it and I'm like, if they ever screwed that up and I staked a ton, it wasn't worth the risk for me. I knew it would probably go off without a hitch, but I was just like, I'm not willing to take that risk. So it was 10%, it was 7%, then it was 5, 6, then 5, and now we're down way more because so many people are like, I'm going to hold ETH anyway. I think ETH is going to go up in value. ETH is a deflationary asset because the more transactions and the more that go on, the more ETH that gets burned. So actually the amount of ETH in circulation is actually going down, and the more people that stake, the less ETH obviously in tradable circulation. So why not, even though it's only 2 or 3%, why not make that? Because to me it's more sound money than buying a bond right now. 3.2% here seems more valuable to me because I know ETH itself is not inflating.
So I don't know if you're going to get to this, and if you are, I'll sit back and wait. But is there, because you were talking about the lockup before, like what is the term to run a 32 ETH validator independently? How long is the commitment that you have to lock it up and run it?
There is no commitment. So this is the funny thing. When I set mine up, it was, I think my first one, I set it up in April. That one didn't start. So I was in the queue because you can only bring on, I'm going to get the number wrong per block. It's either like 50 or 500. It's probably 50, whatever it was. I had like a 2-week waiting period for my first one. So April to early May. My second one went online shortly after the first one went online. So I think May, but that one took like 5 or 6 weeks. So, remember it got unlocked last spring. So everybody, I was not the only person who had this idea, but like, okay, it's working. I can get it out whenever I want. So to get in now, I don't know what the wait is now, because my last one I did a couple months ago and the wait was even longer. But to get out, because you can get a bunch out per block, but very few people are trying to get out. So you can get out. I think it'd be a block or two, honestly. So it'd be almost instantaneous.
Okay. So in theory, you're not really locking it up for any said period of time.
No. Now, I guess the only black swan, if something terrible happened and everybody had to get out because ETH somehow got compromised, or like Geth or one of these execution clients that's underpinning all this, and I'll show you what that means in a second. If something like had a bug in it and people are trying to get out in mass, then you could be stuck. It will eventually get out, but it can only process so many per block, and it's first come, first serve. So there's a risk, but right now the wait to get out would be virtually zero.
Okay.
So with Rocketpool, whereas just attestation, we have for the solo staking of about 2.25%. Rocketpool, you get about 3.2%, and that's 45% increase over solo staking. So right away you're thinking like, why wouldn't I go Rocketpool?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of advantages to going Rocketpool. It's a very smart group of folks who developed this. They keep iterating, keep making it better. But, there are definite trade-offs with risks. And that's why I wanted to get involved in this, kind of dabble in each one so I could kind of feel it myself and see which one was the best. Obviously, Lido is NA again, because you got to be a whale to even be able to validate there. So other rewards, proposals, tips, there's actually more on top of that. But that figure about another 1%. So I'll kind of explain what that is here, and I'll get in a little more detail on the next page. But basically, if you propose a block, it's not you just saying like, yep, I agree. Yep, I agree. You're kind of passively doing the attestation. Sometimes you get to propose one. I've proposed a couple, and you could be lucky or unlucky. You may not propose one for years, and then that number is going to be 0%. Or you could get a couple, like one of my validators did in a couple months. And one of them was when all the shit coin and the meme coins were going nuts and someone was trying to get out and front run. I think I got 1.4 ETH on one, and everyone I talked to, they're like, dude, you know how lucky you were? There was like 2 days where that was happening. And, if you weren't one of those proposers, then you didn't get it. So I got extremely lucky. So there's one thing with Rocketpool that's very interesting here, and this is in the pros column. First off, in the solo staking, it is the most secure, but there's also no smart contracts or separate tokens to buy. So ETH solo staking is directly into the Ethereum, into Beacon chain. You are staking directly. You're holding your private keys, and it is it's almost like we talked about with NFTs. Like you're on chain, and you are creating the least amount of variables for surface area vulnerabilities or attack.
So that's the purest play.
By far, solo staking is the purest play. So here's where Rocketpool gets really interesting. So again, we know you only have to stake the 8 ETH to get the 14% reward staking on the other 24%. So you're getting that free money for the cars that hitch to your train, and you also get Rocketpool token rewards. But this is what I wanted to get to above, is the smoothing pool. So what a smoothing pool is where I said, as a solo staker, my other rewards, if I make a proposal, I just have to, that one validator in my basement has to literally be the one be like, hey guys, like, here's the block and here's the order. And everyone's like, all right, you got it. It's yours. And then I get that reward. Smoothing is genius. And from the Rocketpool guys, I mean, hats off to them. With smoothing, basically all of us in the Rocketpool mini pools send any proposals that happen, go to an ETH address that's, controlled by Rocketpool smart contracts, then we all get some. So basically what you're doing is, instead of rolling the dice every time, 1 in a million, literally, with that amount of validators, now, Rocketpool owns almost 3% of everything, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a ton more ETH than your 1, 2, or 3 in your basement. So that smoothing, you're going to get whatever those average of those proposals and tips are on the execution of a new block. You're going to get that percentage of that. So it's a lot cleaner and a lot more true to the curve of what you're actually receiving.
And it would appear to be 100% passive, right? Like you don't have to initiate or vote or do it. You have to propose anything, correct? Like it's kind of the groups doing that.
Yeah. So the proposals, you'd think, really the only thing you have to do is make sure that your node is online and validating and attesting, and the rest takes care of itself. So
it's pretty sharp. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was they try and make it as fair as possible, but the smoothing pool is smart. I will say that, I do my solo staking through this little Nuck box, and there's a quicker way to kind of get up and running through this company called DAppNode. They create a little dashboard UI interface, and DAppNode has been testing it for the last couple months, and smoothing will be introduced to solo stakers as well. So that competitive advantage will soon go away once they're fully tested. I'll probably wait a couple months till after just to make sure nothing.
But you would like to utilize that within your solo staking, correct?
It's funny because one of my validators, that one validator that got that one reward that one day, was more than 10. It was 100x what you usually get on a proposal. So that one lucky roll of the dice where I got that for the year has made it where if I had to choose, with hindsight being 2020, I would obviously choose not to. Now, can I expect that, being a million validators going to 1.5 million going forward? It's only going to get steeper and more and harder. So I'm sure at some point, like for now, I probably won't, because I'd be like, maybe it's like a slot machine before they can reset it. I'm like, I think I got a lucky one. Like if I don't stand up, they're not allowed to reset it. In the casinos, I know I have no rights, but I think that's my one right to,
squatters' rights.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever literally pulled a handle on a casino machine ever, but I've always heard that that's something you can't do. So I probably won't do it until it's more, it's a little more tried and tested. But I think, if I can afford it and I can keep adding more and more validators just as like these long form annuities, I probably will smooth, because for me, it's like I want to get as close to the average on returns as possible, and knowing that with more validators, rolling the dice could go my way, but it also may not go my way at all.
Got it.
Yep. So the next one is the cons, and this is interesting. So obviously with solo staking compared to Rocketpool, you get less rewards, right? You're just staking your own ETH, and you're getting the rewards based on whatever they are, and hopefully some of the proposals and tips and the other stuff. But when you get to Rocketpool, the cons, like at first, the cons aren't that obvious, but you're introducing a whole nother level of risk here as a validator. So you have to buy, per 8 ETH that you stake, you have to buy 2.4 ETH worth of the RPL token as staking insurance. And you actually, when you set up your mini pool, you put the 8 ETH in, and right before you can validate, you have to add that 2.4 ETH worth of Rocketpool. So what is that? 2-4 grand. It's about just under $5,000.
Just under 5K, yeah.
So you're adding 5K to each of those nodes. So Rocketpool, and I at first I was like, why would they? That feels Ponzi-ish, but it's actually smart on their part, because Rocketpool, if you get slashed, you don't take care of your validators at all, and it's getting slashed, your people in the train cars are getting screwed, and they're not getting their rewards. So Rocketpool needs some way to be able to, because that slashing, it's not like it's going to Rocketpool, it's going to the ETH network and the other validators who are being honest. So Rocketpool needed a way to kind of penalize you and make sure they take care of the people in your train if you just like have that thing go offline. So they will start slashing your Rocketpool from that. But here are the cons. Like Rocketpool could absolutely tank, like you have to lock up Rocketpool to stake, but Rocketpool's also got a problem, because if you have to buy all that, remember, you got all these people in the train station who just have a train ticket. They don't want to drive the engine. They just want to ride the train and get some rewards. They're waiting for more trains to pull up, but I have to buy Rocketpool tokens. So not only do I have to buy, my train engine, I have to buy like this specialized ticket that's only valid in this ecosystem in order for my train to go too. So it's kind of you're at least doubling your risk profile, if not more, because ETH is probably way more stable and liquid than some token Rocketpool, right?
The hard part to just kind of processing this, the hard part to square in your head is on the 32 solo, right? You're all ETH, it's all in ETH, and you're betting for the, going back to the gambling side of it, you're investing in ETH with your belief purely in ETH. So that's
you're betting long ETH.
Yeah, you're pure on that, right?
It's like an ETH bank account at its simplest term, right?
Yeah, so I don't understand. They couldn't do the 2.4 and just keep that security in ETH. Like, it just feels weird that you have to go to a house token and be tied to, that being your cover charge. And if you look at the return over the year, so say you did the 8 ETH and you ran it and you ended up getting the return of whatever that is at the 1 ETH, you still have exposure to 2.4 ETH in RPL. So you really you really have to do your DYOR on if you're bullish on that. And then you probably really have to look at the tokenomics of like, wait, so how many of these are getting used for that? And, okay.
Well, right. And you have to look at the inflation of Rocketpool. We know the inflation of ETH is
not happening.
It's actually negative right now. It's like negative 0.02%. It's just negative, but it's negative. And as ETH picks up, I think it'll go more and more negative. But Rocketpool, I believe, is anywhere from 5 to 7%. So what Rocketpool does, remember, when you stake the Rocketpool, you get Rocketpool rewards every 28 days based on how much you have staked. So if you have a lot staked and you're getting more share of Rocketpool than it's inflating, then in theory you're okay. But you also have the variable of the demand from the public for Rocketpool token. So I would argue the main demand is for the train engineers who want to have their 8 ETH validator, so the other 24 ETH staking passengers can hook on. But you could see in a bull market where big funds who invest in crypto are like, okay, yeah, I love Lido and we'll get more to Lido on the next page, but Rocketpool is a good one. It's decentralized. It's a good model. Like, there is a reason why they have that, but you have to weigh all that in. And let's say, it's 45% more rewards on average than solo staking. That could be wiped out and then some easily from the Rocketpool token going down. And I don't want to complicate things too much, but when you buy the Rocketpool from ETH, if you got lucky and bought the Rocketpool where Rocketpool was kind of low, depressed price compared to ETH that you just got out of. Remember, you were not thinking US dollars here. It's ETH to Rocketpool ratio. So if you bought that when it was very depressed Rocketpool to ETH, you're in good shape. But a lot of people, when this got big last spring, bought when Rocketpool was high at like it was worth $60, but compared to ETH, its ratio was very high. Now those people are pissed because they're validating, they're driving all the trains, and the Rocketpool value went down. So all the ETH rewards they're getting has been offset and then some by a token they don't necessarily even want.
And like, I get that part, that variable, and I understand, the logic of putting it in there, but it just feels like that leads to potentially more politicalization of the community, because you have people that they had different entry points. Whereas if you look at the 32, as we say, like, that's just pure and simple what it is, and you're straight on the beacon chain, you're straight doing this, you're getting with withdrawals or whatever going to your wallet, and you're just, no other factor except the success of the Ethereum network comes into play. Whereas with this, you're going to have a community aspect of people navigating their position within this token that they were forced to purchase and to go with. So yes, it could be awesome if Rocketpool moons. Yeah. But you know what? There's a ton of coins that would be awesome if they mooned, and
yeah,
wow, It's like everything going down that list up to this point until you hit the cons. It's like no brainer. I'm all over it. And now
Yeah.
it's like you really got to factor that in, like, how what your profile is with this RPL token.
Yeah, you just brought up something really interesting. ETH solo staking is not political. There's no politics, there's no variables. It's you, your own security, and the security of the Ethereum network. Those are the only things you have to worry and think about. This introduces developers, smart contracts, people. And, once I was a Rocketpool mini pool validator, like I said, I set one up early last week. And I got to say, I went into the community and there was a lot of people super pro Rocketpool amongst the rank and file. And there was a lot of people who are really down on it. And I think a big part of who's who was when you got in. If you got into Rocketpool and started validating super early, then yeah, the Rocketpool is probably worth like 0.06 cents at the time. And now you're just like, I made a fortune in Rocketpool. That's nothing. I have all this extra Rocketpool to keep setting up validators. So for you, it's like buying ETH, when it was $5-10 and buying a CryptoPunk because you have so much ETH, you're like, whatever, sure, why not? But for the people who got in when it was higher, they are super angry. And even some of the early people recognize the argument from the people who got in when the ratio was really bad, who've gotten burned by this, are saying like, look, this is not a good long range strategy. And the early people, I think, are more myopic to like, no, this has been great. And look at the 5-year trend, like Rocketpool compared to ETH over time actually goes up because, our ETH doesn't have any inflation, but ours is very light. And we're going to incentivize people even outside of the stakers and the validators to hold Rocketpool. But remember, if you change this formula and go to 4 ETH or make you stake less Rocketpool, what's going to happen to the train conductors who hold a lot of Rocketpool? They're going to be like, they probably think it's a net positive, but it could pin a lot less Rocketpool and a lot frees up. And people will be like, oh, thank goodness, I'm not doing another validator. I'm out. I'm no, thank you. So it's a slippery slope if you change those token dynamics even slightly. It could put a lot of sell pressure and a lot of supply out for that token. So, it took about a week to kind of come to all these conclusions, and it's probably silly to play with your own money and do this, but the other side of the argument, if you're a risk taker, is we all think we're at the foothills of the next bull market. Whether we have a couple pump fakes or not, we think we're at the foothills. One could argue that a much smaller coin that's has the market value of 1/1000th of ETH or whatever Rocketpool has, that it could totally moon, and then you win on all sides. You get your Rocketpool rewards. The Rocketpool you bought earlier goes up. So maybe I keep the one validator, but I don't know. I guess the older I get, the more risk averse I am, and the less risk I want to take with surface area attack on the ETH that I hold.
And the part that doesn't sit well, is that you have to do it, like that you're forced to purchase it. Yeah. So it feels like, you're kind of like getting shoved in the locker, like, oh, okay, you want to do this? Here you go. And it's like, where's my invoice for the 2.4 ETH /RPL? But, wow, going through this whole process, it really does. And I hate to go back to the same theme that we keep stumbling on, but it's like, you really have to understand what sort of investor, holder, validator you want to be. And it's nice that there's these different opportunities and options to look at and to kind of see. But I would argue that if you're a purist, or you're moving towards being more of a purist NFT collector, and you're, valuing the status of the on-chain and maybe the collection size, and, those are some of the factors that are important to you when you're discerning what to collect. It's similar, kind of your personality or ethos is going to come through on this as well. So, if you're more of a risk taker and looking at that, then yeah, you'll roll the dice on the Rocketpool because you're getting ostensibly you're getting more return right away. But it does add another factor into the equation, and you got to kind of look at how many factors in each equation you're willing to kind of work with.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said. And until you dive into this, it's hard to know. But there's actually there's more pieces to this. Remember, we just talked about being the train conductor. So your points will be even more validated, no pun intended, when we get into ETH staking. So what an ETH staker is just, you're not validated. We're on the other side of the equation now, right? So
Passenger.
Yeah, you're the passenger now. And if you're an ETH staker, obviously for solo staking, like I'd love for everybody to recommend like, hey, just get 32 ETH, mortgage part of your house and be a solo staker. Like, come on, join us. Like,
not financial advice.
Yeah, not even at all. But that also isn't even responsible advice, because a lot of people they didn't get in early with the ETH, or they're just kind of dollar cost averaging in now. You don't necessarily want to have to wait until you get to 32 ETH to at least hold ETH and then get some benefit from it. So what I would recommend, it kind of comes out in this page, is on the staking side where you don't run a validator. If you're just staking, so if you're the train passenger in Rocketpool, you need 0.01 ETH to get on the train. That's not much, right? So once you get on the train with that, and Lido is also 0.01, so teeny little amount that you need. What is that? 30, or that's $20, right? So you need $20 of Rocketpool or Lido right now to get on their trains. Now we're going to be comparing Rocketpool to Lido, because obviously with solo staking, you need 32 ETH.
So that's the NA. That's going to be the NA side this time.
Lido is the NA side, and the last one, because unless you have 7,000 validators, just sitting around, you're not going to be a validator. But on the staking side, that's where Lido becomes very interesting. So the fees paid to validators. Rocketpool, as we saw from the other side, is the train conductor. 14% of your proceeds on what you put in go to the Rocketpool validators, which is nice for the Rocketpool validator side. But for you, well, Lido's 10%. So already we're looking at Rocketpool versus Lido like, it's only 4%. Maybe not a big deal, but it's 4%, right? So that 4% is less staking rewards in your pocket. So what are the staking rewards? This is from their website, and these adjust every couple weeks per block. Like I said, I think they went down a lot lately, but Rocketpool right now is boasting for the stakers a 3.41%, and Lido is boasting 3.7. Lido was 4% last week. So with more validators coming on, like I said, the less that number, that percentage reward gets.
Let me just interject one thing that isn't in this analysis, but just for the market value. If you were to utilize Coinbase's Ethereum staking right now, it's at a 3.29. So
that's
food for thought. That's where that comes in.
No, that's a really good reference. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to add a fourth column, but I'm like, let's stick to liquid staking, then we can add to this over time. But that completely makes sense, because I can tell you, Rocketpool, you pay 14% of your rewards to the validators. Lido, you pay 10%. And with Coinbase, it's a central exchange, and it's very simple to do if you're on there. If you want to keep your money on a central exchange, I wouldn't recommend it personally, but you could do what you want. They take 25% of your rewards. So that makes sense that they'd be below even Rocketpool at 3.29. Arguably, it's probably even a hair less than that, because, the thing about the central exchanges too, I don't know, like, they're staking, they have validators, obviously, or they have a partner that has validators. Are they giving you part of the if you're going to propose or the tips? I guess with those numbers, it seems like it all falls in line. They probably do, and they just roll it all up and give it to you and take their 25%. But it's just interesting with a centralized exchange. I assume you have less visibility on that.
And side note, that just goes to what we talked about a couple episodes ago about Coinbase building this, building themselves up to kind of win no matter how things play out in the future. So if they're getting, you know, upwards 6% more than Rocketpool, off the top, so to speak, and they may be considered the safe play with more of the institutions or the smaller, market money manager guys coming in, like they'll see some upside is my point.
Oh,
Like,
for sure. And with a central exchange, they're smart, but it's not 6%. Remember, it's 14 to 25. It's 11% more than Rocketpool and 15% more than Lido that they're taking. But again, if Coinbase, one can envision them becoming possibly a big bank. And in that case, I would, like, if I could have some of my business accounts there and, it was easier to make payments, I would totally like switch in and out of dollars and ETH. Like, in long-term stuff, I would obviously move and hold my own, but I would hold like short-term for like paying employees and stuff in like a
yeah,
Coinbase, and then it makes sense. And if they take 25%, you're like, I could certainly bring it onto my own wallets and then stake with Lido very simply and probably get a little more rewards. But, right now a lot of money's coming in and out, with just kind of your first cash reserves, and I'd be fine
yeah,
with that. So it could be a win for them, but I'm glad you brought up Coinbase because that gives a
sure,
good perspective kind of on what the CEXs are doing.
sure.
So here are the pros and cons. The pros of Rocketpool: it's a smaller liquid staking provider, and it's very decentralized. Only 2.9% of the entire Ethereum staking pool right now is with Rocketpool. So 3%, that's nothing to slouch at. They came way after Lido, but they're smaller. You probably already know this, Disco. You want to guess what Lido is?
In terms of,
Percentage share of all staking.
yeah, it's like 40.
And it's not 40, but it's
No.
it's 32. So they have 32% of all staking, and now you're getting into, you're at a third. You're getting into like pretty centralized things.
Yes.
And I actually have a slide to show you kind of where that under the hood, it's even kind of more centralized than you think. But think about this Lido DAO and kind of the people that run it. Like, there could be a bad proposal and they could vote to do something because if you're in Lido, which I staked some of my rewards from my Stolo staker came off, so I grabbed a couple ETH and I put it into Lido, so I'm staking there now, just to try it. And it was literally, if you've ever used Uniswap, it was literally like changing ETH to WETH. It was that simple. Like, I went to the Lido website, I staked my ETH, and they were like, you're done. Like, validated it with the wallet, and that was it. It was that easy. And any amount you could do, and it stakes immediately. So it's because they have such a great market share, it's extremely liquid to get in and out. Now, there are times if there are panics, they had this interesting thing. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's called like what was it? It was called like the bunker, and the bunker is when like something's bad happening, people are panicking, and if people want to get out, they might slow you down because they don't want to depeg STETH, which is the Lido version of it's your staked ETH, right? And if they bring you from staked ETH back to regular ETH, if everyone's trying to get out at once, they don't want to depeg it. So they basically will throttle it out. So they're not with no risks there. There are some, but that bottleneck could be the biggest if you're, it's almost like if there's a decentralized bank run, you could get out later, and that depegging could theoretically happen. It hasn't happened yet, but so even in decentralized finance, it's not like your ETH isn't there. It's just with the STETH, the ETH. STETH is a 1-to-1 on ETH, but with a panic, it could get kind of all out of balance. It's like when what was the token? Was that USDC kind of, and Tether and a couple kind of unpegged from the dollar by like at 90 cents, and people who thought it'd be fine bought it, and that was like free arbitrage money for them, right? I think that was earlier this year. So there's gambles there too, but I will say that getting in and out of Lido to stake your ETH for your 3.5-4% was it could not be quicker and easier to get in and out on a sunny day.
Well, it still goes to, and maybe I'll hold on until I didn't realize we had cons here to get into, which is good, but I know I'm going to keep harping on the same thing, but it really comes down to, you have to be, you have to, in your own mind, be like, is this return of the 3.7 or whatever worth the potential risk? And, for some folks, it may be like, what, I'm just going to sit and hold in a cold wallet. Right. And for me, I'm more comfortable with that. And I'm not going to, I don't see the upside in having any risk of, God forbid something big happens and you're not able to access it and you can take a loss. You might be a little more comfortable if it's just sitting on a cold wallet and you're holding for the future. So it's just a thought to bring into this equation.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I would, like, if you and I had to make a bet, although you would never take the other side of this bet, in 5 years, are you going to be wealthier because you made compounding interest on 3.7 or 3.4%, or on the fact that you just held ETH, securely stored it, and it appreciated in value? I think I would take the bet all day long, like 80-20 or 90-10, that the ETH is going to be the one that wins hands down.
And that also, when we've talked about this, we've danced around it, we haven't gotten into it on an episode necessarily, but it depends on where you want to hold it as well. So if you're going to, look at some retirement funds and do it from that sort of play, like say you're doing a Roth IRA and you move, some money from your traditional Roth IRA into one that enables you to buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, that's kind of set it and forget it, right? Like, you're putting it in there. You can't really get to it until X time. But the fact that you wouldn't have to pay taxes on the gains makes all the other things pretty irrelevant if you're long on either currency.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think we're all betting on the appreciation. Yeah, if you have means to roll over or get a Roth IRA set up, that again, not financial advice at all, anything can happen with black swans, but that could be the play, because a Roth, when you take it out when you're retired, obviously it grows tax, it's post-tax money, but it grows tax-free and it comes out tax-free. And I think it has a lot of good positives with heirs too. You can pass it on to them, and I think it's still pretty tax preferential. So we
may do it. We may use that as a deep dive at some point, just to.
I think we will, because I'm looking right now at the best way to do it and get some of my stuff out of more traditional mixes. Not everything, but way more and more, to take more gambles with this, because every time I look to buy a stonk, I end up just going back to Coinbase or Cash App and just buying more Bitcoin and Ethereum, because I own enough stonks, and I don't know, it just seems like until the inflation unwind or we have more clarity there, which we may never have, it just seems like a more risky bet, which sounds probably crazy to normies, but to folks of us in the space, everyone gets it. You're like, you see the light and you invest accordingly. So the cons real quick. So with Rocketpool to Lido, you do have lower returns because of the slightly higher fee paid to the validators, and you might have to wait for that validator to come to the train station, which to me would be very frustrating. Be like, that seems like a deal breaker. So Rocketpool would be very incentivized to get as many trains waiting at the station as they can. So the demand, the stakers coming on the train are always getting in very quickly, because the Lido is almost instantaneous. So that's a real problem for them. And I think that's why they're still only at 3%. I mean, the model is great. And you make a great point. Like, what if they had not used a Rocketpool token at all? Like, what if they had used ETH as the insurance? So let's say you had to buy 2.4 ETH and then it went in this separate smart contract that they held. And then with that ETH, maybe the foundation takes some for marketing and to pay salaries and stuff like that. And then that also gets staked for awards. I don't know. Like, I guess my point is why does it have to be Rocketpool? It almost is like, that's like going to the arcade or going to Chuck E. Cheese, getting Chuck E. Cheese tokens. And then there's this other room behind the curtain that you have to trade Chuck E. Cheese tokens for super Zipple Zapple. Yeah. like, okay, now I have already don't understand the value of these silly Chuck E. Cheese tokens, but now I'm now like layer 3ing on the Chuck E. Cheese tokens. Like, wait a second, why am I doing this? Like, let's just stick with Ethereum. So the more you do your research, the more Rocketpool is a con. And I will say, when I went on to Discord, I don't think I dove in last page, but when I went into the Discord, I have this NUC, like I said, I use DAppNode, and there's the interface is it's easier to use. You still have to do some command line tools, but they've made it easier. And I'm not going to say I got mocked and derided, but I showed you the screenshots. I should probably post them somewhere, but they were definitely like, hey, if you don't know command line, like, we don't need you as a validator. And they didn't say that, but that was the inference. And I was thinking, like, what a dumb, short-sighted way to treat. I was asking Rocketpool questions like, hey, how do I get my rewards out? They're like, oh, you're on a NUC with DAppNode. Like, sorry, dude. Shamed. Like, good luck, buddy. Go figure that out. And I'm thinking, like, there's a ton of us who are running on these. You need more train conductors. And you basically just told me, like, learn command line stuff or beat it. And they weren't jerks about it, but they were definitely like, that's the way. And that was, they even said, they're like, hey, we don't necessarily believe all of that, but we're volunteers. And that's kind of the tone that the management has taken and the belief they've taken. And my point to them is, like, as ecosystems evolve, UI gets better and simpler systems for more and more people who aren't as tech savvy to get on board to be validators. Does that increase surface area of risk to be a solo staker, to be a validator then for Rocketpool? Yes, but that's why you're at 2.9%, because you're making people buy your Rocketpool, and because you're treating new folks kind of like crap. So am I going to hold that Rocketpool mini node? I may for a little, just to see if there's a little pump in it. But as soon as I see that go back in the 30s again, and that's a gamble because it could go back to 18. And then I'm like, yay, everything that I stake there, I've already lost for the year or 2 years as I get out. So, but I'm probably not going to continue. And I certainly am not going to set up another mini pool.
Yeah. That's counterintuitive to trying to make something work. And, it's, here comes a genius statement, but it's supply and demand. And if they need people to fricking validate to grow their percents and, get all these other people to be able to be into the ecosystem and part of it, it should be welcoming, and it should be, very encouraging, as opposed to any sort of snide remarks or, looking down their nose at you because you used something that was designed to do it and worked and accomplished the goal. So what's the point?
Yeah, well said, well said. So, and the cons of Lido are they own 32% of the staking market, which is certainly unhealthy for decentralization. And I'm going to show you another page that's kind of an eye opener. But you're dependent on these 29 massive companies, these validator pools. 29 is not a varied, if some of these guys get slashed or just for some reason
split.
Went down or whatever, yeah, you'd be in big trouble. But I will say my strategy after learning both of these about staking and validating is it's actually slightly different from a comment you made. I think it's perfectly acceptable to buy your ETH right now and just hold it, because we all think the appreciation of the ETH itself is going to dwarf what you can get from staking. Now, if you can stake 32 ETH, I would recommend it. It feels good. You get, your 3.x%, and hopefully that new 3 ETH you get or whatever, or 1 ETH per year is appreciating too, so you win. But if you hold it, that's fine. I was going to suggest Lido until you can get to 32 ETH and then get that solo staker running. But, for a lot of people that could take years and years and years. But just, I guess I'm going to backtrack because of what you said, Disco. Just make sure you're on your own hardware wallet. Protect your keys, protect your mnemonic phrase, or whatever the right word for that is, and just protect your ETH. That's number one. If you can get to a solo staker, do it. If you play around with Lido, just know that if you ever see smoke anywhere and you feel like big things are coming down and you unstake for a couple days, like if the movie theater catches fire, like be the guy by the exit and get out first, because then you won't have to wait. I guess that's all I would say. I think the risk profile for them, it's not big, it's not tiny, but just know what you're getting into. I think Lido should be pretty safe, but
to me, just walking through this exercise, to me, the thing that scares me in terms of, I'll just put something in Lido, is the fact that I'm sure the whales are going to get, first access out if they need to, or if they can leave whenever they want. You have an exodus of 10% or 20% of the whales who are the validators. What does that do to you as a staker? So it's just it's like, well, they're not going to really be looking to take care of, Disco with his little pittance, and he's not even a validator. So that's kind of it kind of scares me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess if someone literally just started pulling the plug on a bunch of validators and we're getting slashed, I mean, for the rest of us, it would be a field day because we'd get those slashing rewards. And the longer, when you're off, you actually just kind of lose rewards. If you're off long enough, you get slashed. You really get slashed when you have like duplicate keys. Or if you're starting to create fake transactions and trying to push them through. So going offline for a day for a solo staker, you don't actually it's not like slash. It's more like you just don't get the rewards for a while. Now, eventually you'll slowly start getting slashed, but it's generally, as long as you have decent uptime, you should be fine. And the only thing you'll lose is the reward because you weren't validating in the first place.
Right. I'm saying that within Lido, if it's, they have this big percent, and as we were going through earlier, there's only so many people that are able, or companies that are able to do the validating. If any of that goes away, I don't know what that does to the rest of the Lido ecosystem. And that's a risk that may keep me away.
Yeah, no. And I get that. I'm saying from the other side, if they did do that, it would be incredible. But yes, if they go off, I mean, I don't even know how the smart contracts in Lido would handle that. But again, it's like you said, it's 29 different companies with a ton of validators and warehouses. But it's a gamble because that's very centralized. In fact, this is interesting. So these are the big ones, the 29 companies. Okay, so there's a couple under 7,000. This is probably a new one. And the funny thing is, you've heard of some of these, like Jump Crypto, Rock Logic. Like I've definitely, maybe not like in everyday conversations or on crypto Twitter, but I'm like, okay, these are some companies I've heard of. When you have 7,000 validators, each validator having 32 ETH, like these guys are monsters. But look at this. So the different layers and infrastructure of what makes up a validator, you get the consensus layer, you get the execution layer, and then of course you have just the infrastructure on what they're built on. So a couple big ahas here. There's only so many consensus layers. You got Prism, Teku, you got Lighthouse, which is the big one. I believe the hidden one is Nimbus down there. So you got these different ones. Lighthouse is almost 33%, Nimbus down here, Prism. They're all sharing a big portion of it. But you've got 3 or 4 different consensus layers that you can choose. And as a solo staker, we get to choose from this same exact list. But this one, the consensus layer isn't bad. You've got Ethereum and then these different ones. And this is great because this builds resilience because each of these is a different code set, right? So let's get into infrastructure. Look how many are on the public cloud. And to me, that means Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud. And so, what if
centralized?
What if Uncle Sam just says like, no, you're not using him for that,
And by the way, with like what's happening today, like we don't even know what could have happened because we've been offline while we're doing this show, but there could have been more developments. We if we did it yesterday, we didn't think that Binance was going to deal with what they were dealing with today. Or so just that's part of it to me, is just like how quick some of these things can come. And, there are these different forces that are just really impacting things. So,
just remember, and how long is it going to take us to upload the show to YouTube? And by then people will be like, dude, ETH's at 4,600 and Gary Gensler's been fired. Be like, wait, what? So hopefully by the time you guys get this on Wednesday, pre-Thanksgiving, everything will still be fairly relevant and fresh. But otherwise, just, hey, stick around, enjoy our company. And Indeed. Before I forget, we had Dr. G on the other week about decentralized AI. If you have any ideas about, decentralization or things you want to talk about, hit us up. Like Dr. G hit us up. We had him on the show the next week, and it was one of the most fascinating conversations we've had. So please do that and subscribe, hit the like button, make a comment if you're an Apple podcast. Like all that stuff's important and helps us, kind of get discovered, because everybody wants short, quick clips and, buy this, buy that. We're doing the opposite. We're basically saying like, all right, we feel a bull coming, but let's be safe, everybody. So, we want to be in this with all of you, and we want to know who you are and kind of ride this next bull responsibly, but fun and profitably, hopefully, but together. So
well said.
Yeah. Thanks. So look at this right bottom pie chart. So client diversity on the execution layer, Geth, which is a one that a lot of solo stakers use, and Geth was, I believe it was the first one. So it makes sense that it's the biggest, it's the oldest, it's the most stable. But just think about if the Geth execution layer, and I'd be in trouble too, but if that got hacked and some bug got in where it caused like slashing, can you imagine like 78% of all the Lido validators would just be offline? So there's where you're getting the cloud services, and I would say Geth as the execution layer and the fact that there's 29 big massive validator companies doing all the validating. It's not the worst thing in the world, but for a token and an ecosystem that is trying to be as decentralized as possible, this definitely isn't it. And the fact that Lido has 32% of all staking, like that would make me feel a lot better if they were under 20%.
Yeah. And that just goes to the bigger theme of the show of like, do things become centralized as they get more adoption, and is it inevitable? And it leads to that, because, you didn't start off thinking that it was, centralized, but if you look at public cloud and you look at, that's got to fuse into the Web 2 and the AWS and, Microsoft and all that, if they're really, tied in. And then, as you say, with this Geth, it's like kind of the more things get accepted and grow, there is that pull towards kind of the centralization elements. And if you're saying that there's under 30 primary players dictating, close to 32% of the overall supply, like you got to start paying attention to that.
Yeah, for sure. And you just have to know, what kind of ETH holder and staker you are, because how high up on the risk curve do you want to go, and how worth it is it when we all think ETH is going to appreciate, and that's going to be the biggest factor in whether we're Jenny Wealth rich or or not,
Yeah.
One other little piece, and then we'll wrap it up on this side. You and I were talking offline, and someone else had an idea. They're like, hey, why don't you, with Rocketpool, if you don't want to buy the Rocketpool, just borrow it on Aave, then you can, use that to stake. If the price goes down, you repay Aave back in the loan. And I was like, that's genius. I'm going to go over there and check it out. But then here is the borrowing interest rate, and it's a variable interest rate. So, if you ever get a 15-year mortgage, you don't necessarily want a variable rate, because you kind of want your home mortgage each month to be very predictable, so you don't have to move out or be forced to like pay triple if it goes from 3% to 15%. And this is where instantly I was like, that's not going to happen. I mean, look at this. Like, it's actually the average. I think they said somewhere, it was in another chart. Oh, here it is, 4.65. So, I mean, that's not the end of the world, but you could borrow it. But look at the variables. So if everyone wanted to get out and panicked, you got these 20%, 18% spikes here. Like, no, thank you. So if you borrowed and everyone else borrowed and you try and get out and you're not the first one in line or the first couple in line, you are probably left holding that Rocketpool bag as it goes to zero. And I'm sure Aave is like, you can keep it, buddy, because we're liquidating, you're not going to win. You're not going to win that bet. So,
yeah, variable is a very scary word to a disco. Like, I get really nervous when I see that as part of the equation with percents next to it,
Yeah, for sure. So that's
Wow.
a lot of learning, and we talked about it. And now that, I've been in it, I've been solo staking for a while, but now that I get Rocketpool and Lido more, I'm still in Rocketpool right now. I just dabbled in it. I'm not sweating a ton, but I'm also already, you already heard me like, well, I think I bought it at 26, 27. So I think I'm probably even right now. I think it's back at 26. I think it went to 32 last week, but now I'm like, well, maybe I'll wait for it to go up. So already I'm playing like a silly, I'm playing a board game with my kids, and I'm like, well, all I need snake eyes twice, and I've got this game wrapped up. It's like, oh, you just keep rolling sevens because
which is a complete contrast to the solo staking. You know what I mean? Where that's money out of your wallet. You're not going to spend. There's no other variable, so it's that's just in place. So my net would be, with where I am on my journey, and I really appreciate going through, the different corridors of the options and really putting yourself through that, and, you kind of role playing through it. For me, it's, accumulate what you can, hold what you can, don't spend what you don't want to, accumulate and hold as much as you can. And then ultimately at some point, it may be very, very validation. It might be a great validation to become a solo validator. I couldn't resist playing with those words, but that's kind of my long-term goal now. It's like, just keep chiseling away. Don't get too cute. You're not going to buy a mansion off of the, 3% returns or whatever you're going to get from that. So stay the course and keep doing what you're doing. So thanks for that dive. That was incredible.
Yeah, my pleasure.
As always,
there's a lot of half advice.
As always, the purpose of this show is entertainment, and we encourage you to do your own research, and nothing that we've said can be construed as financial advice. So best of luck on all decisions you make, and hopefully we can help inform some of your thought processes while you look to do what you would like to do moving forward.
Yep. Take care, all. Have a good one.
Bye.